Hello and welcome to another Warcraft 3 commentary video. I talk on this channel about three things. Things I think you guys want to hear about, things I think you guys need to hear about, and things I want to talk about. Today is going to be category number 3, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. You see, I have been thinking a lot about this recently. I've been wanting to do a big expose about the role of unit upgrades in RTS games in general. I even started expanding the scope of my talking topic to unit upgrades beyond just real-time strategy games, including turn-based strategy games. I realized the topic is so big that it cannot possibly be done by me with my current experience of talking about it, without first going into something where I have a much greater level of expertise. Warcraft 3 unit upgrades. And I was working out the kinks and everything and trying to figure out what unit upgrades are worth, how to break it down and structure it in a way that it makes sense to people and that people can start to appreciate just how deep and interesting and interconnected all the different upgrades are in a game like Warcraft 3. But also it was sparked by a discussion on upgrades in general because I had seen a thread on Reddit where people were discussing unit upgrades in the new subreddit of Stormgate. And people were talking about, are numerical upgrades a good thing in RTS games? Are they a bad thing? Should upgrades be more unique than just +1 attack, +1 armor? And that really got me thinking. So I'm thinking, what is the best way to do upgrades in RTS games? What creates the greatest level of enjoyment for people? What is the best to balance around with? And then I realized, okay, I need to map this out because otherwise I can't make sense of it. And I did. I mapped it out. And we're going to be going through that tonight. We'll be talking about Warcraft 3 and upgrades, and maybe you'll learn a little bit more about the game that we all love, and maybe we'll all get a little bit more insight about the role that upgrades play in strategy games. If you're ready, let's begin. So, there was also a thread here on Reddit. I just picked up Warcraft 3 again. Most of my RTS experience was in StarCraft. And in StarCraft, upgrades make or break your game. It's typical to build a lot of Evo chambers and then get a lot of upgrades. But from what I've seen in Warcraft, unit upgrades aren't taken seriously at all when I watch streams of excellent players. In my games, I always try to fully upgrade my units, but I almost never see it in good players like Grubby. What's the reason for that? Are upgrades more situational? And if so, should I upgrade my units? I play Undead, pretty standard, with DK Panda Lich. That's not standard. That is not standard Panda, but okay. That's cool. Most of it made sense. And a very recognizable, actually, because this is how many people do upgrades in an RTS. Without the time pressure of an opponent, it seems to make a lot of sense to get a lot of upgrades, because then your units have more value and they're better. And then once you're done with all that, then you start conquering the map, right? And maybe in campaigns sometimes that's true, if the developer didn't put a lot of pressure on you early. But what is the total value of upgrades, and why do we get them, and why do we like them? Well, let's jump into that. So it is going to be a very nerdy topic. We'll go into a lot of general stuff and also a lot of numerical stuff. So first of all, there is what upgrades actually bring you in terms of fun, right? It's fun to upgrade your units. You've got the power fantasy of growth. You're investing in the value of your current units and of future units. The amount of upgrades that you have can dictate the pacing of gameplay flow, because after all, if you just finish an upgrade, your entire army gets a little stronger than it was before. This gets globally upgraded instantly. If I discover a new type of shield in my castle, you on the front line immediately get that upgraded shield. So once you get that upgrade, everything gets stronger and you can base an attack timing around that time. The avoidance of redundancy. Basic units can become less basic. Think, for instance, of the Mutalisk unit in StarCraft. In StarCraft 1, it can turn into a Guardian or a Devourer, which are both much more purpose-driven unit. The Guardian is a long-range siege unit, and the Devourer is an anti-air support unit. So you can go away from one unit and become another, so you can make them more advanced. Preparation. An unupgraded unit heralds the value of its upgrades as an option. So by that, you have an unupgraded unit that can research True Seeing. It doesn't have it yet, but he's a herald of an upgrade to come. Once you get the upgrade for Sentinels on Huntresses, you gain the ability to use them as a form of true sight with the owls on the trees in Warcraft 3. So now you're more prepared for opponent cloaked units, for instance, right? Choice and direction. When you invest in a certain direction with your upgrades, it can make switching into another unit more costly. While that sounds like a bad thing, I've already invested in Unit A, now Unit B is completely unupgraded, should I even be going for it? While that sounds like a bad thing, it's a good thing because it makes our choices more meaningful. Just like in an ARPG game where doing a respec of your character is somewhat costly, at least. It costs some measure of gold or time or experience points. That feels a little bit more like a meaningful decision than in newfangled games where developers coddle players and allow any amount of respecing any amount of times. It makes it feel like any of our choices are less permanent and less meaningful. Not to say that I don't like respecing, but I will say that in Divinity 2 Original Sin, the fact that I know that I can respec at any time can make me prepare for any challenge with a completely respect character. And that feels a little easy, so I deliberately artificially limit myself to not do it because it feels too good. It feels too powerful. Whereas if you take a game like Path of Exile, if you do a respec there, the longer you wait, the more it costs you, right? And in Diablo 2, you can't respec at all. Until, I think, maybe there was like 1 or 2 ways to respec, but mostly in Diablo 2, if you bricked your character, you just had to start a new one. Yeah, so that felt very... But then later you could could you respec with certain Horadric Cube formulas? There is one quest that allows you to respec, and eventually they added it. Yeah, but back when I was playing, you couldn't. If you did one wrong point, you bricked your character, you had to restart. So, there's a kind of inertia to getting upgrades, right? Then I want to talk a little bit about what kind of upgrades are there in Warcraft 3 and in general, but specifically focused on Warcraft 3. There are a lot of different upgrades, and there's a lot of confusion about when you should be getting which upgrades. And people aren't that sure of the exact value of upgrades. And you can see this because even some high-level players sometimes get, what I would say, the wrong upgrade. And I've learned a lot about Warcraft upgrades myself when researching this topic. So let's jump into types of upgrades. So you have the qualitative upgrades. These are anything that increase the quality of that which you have. So you've got speed upgrades, range upgrades, caster upgrades, sight, hero upgrades, utility upgrades, building upgrades, unit transformation. So an example of a speed upgrade would be, and these are the only ones I could think of, if there are more let me know. Ghoul Frenzy makes ghouls faster. Berserker upgrade is a headhunter transformational upgrade, but it actually gives them 20% bonus movement speed when activating the Berserker activation. The tooltip only reads bonus attack speed and bonus damage received. It doesn't talk about movement speed, but anyone that has used it must have had an inkling that the Berserkers get a little faster, so it's a speed upgrade. They've got range upgrades for the Rifleman and Archer, and to a degree for the Chimera Corrosive Breath, though it's only range upgrade against buildings. Then you've got caster upgrades like Adept and Master Training. You've got heroes which are casters, they can get their skill points. Sight upgrades like Ultravision, Farsight, and the Magic Sentry, so that you get some form of true seeing and you get some extra vision sometimes. Hero upgrades, there are only 2 actual hero upgrades, namely Nature's Blessing, upgrading the Force of Nature treants on Keeper of the Grove, and you've got Ultravision that can give female Knight of Heroes bonus vision. Then you have utility upgrade like Backpack. You've got building upgrades such as Masonry, Spikes, Spike Barricades, Magic Sentry, Nature's Blessing, Wellspring, Fragmentation Shards, which now works on cannon towers, and Reinforced Defenses on burrows and towers. And then you've got unit transformational upgrades, where the Obsidian statue becomes a destroyer, the Druid of the Claw, the Druid becomes a bear, the Druid of the Talon becomes a crow, and the Berserker upgrade, the Headhunter becomes a Berserker, and the Gargoyle can become a statue. So these are some unit transformational upgrades, and then there may be some others as well. And then you've got the numerical upgrades. And there is a lot to talk about when it comes to the numerical upgrades. And we will, because this is Grubby Talks. So we're going to talk about it. You've got the attack upgrades up to 3. And then you've got armor upgrades up to 3. And these are made through the upgrade buildings, the war mill, the hunter's hall, the blacksmith, and the graveyard. Right? So upgrades in Warcraft 3. Upgrades in Warcraft 3 are researchable for heroes, units, and buildings. They can improve innate abilities or grant access to new ones. And here's that list that we talked about of all the different upgrades that you can get. As you can see, there are quite a few. And it stands to reason that when you're playing a game of Warcraft 3, you're not going to get all of them. But it can be really hard to see the forest with all the trees that are here. And therefore, it is good to understand a little bit the value of different upgrades and to understand the direction that you might be wanting to go. When is it worth to get upgrades? Is a question I often get. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons for upgrades. The advantages of upgrades. They're a way to improve your army. You can create a higher level of cast effectiveness per one unit. Right? An upgraded unit is worth more than an unupgraded unit. When you get upgrades, it doesn't cost supply. It doesn't cost population size. You can still improve your army strength and invest in them when you're supply blocked. So if you forgot to make that burrow, you forgot to make the farm, the moonwell, then you can still use your money to invest into some attack and armor upgrades, even if otherwise you may not have done it right now. Because, you're supply blocked and there's no point locking 3 grunts in your barracks just waiting for that burrow to finish. You could get an upgrade instead. You can still improve your army strength and invest in them when you're already maxed out at 100. Or you can use upgrades in Warcraft 3, and this is very unique about Warcraft 3. You can still use upgrades to improve your army strength and invest in them when you're intending to stay in no upkeep and when you're intending to stay in low upkeep. Now, I don't want to go too deep into the upkeep system of Warcraft 3, but suffice to say that if you go to 51 population and above, you lose 30% of all sources of gold income, literally. And once you go to 81 or higher, you go to high upkeep and you lose 60% of all sourced gold income. And you may have a question for me, does it also affect? Yes, it does. All sources of gold income. Every single one you can think of, and if you want to think about it, there's more than 6 sources of gold income, and they are all affected. Then you can also proactively improve your army strength and invest in upgrades when approaching any of these thresholds. So you don't need to wait until you get supply blocked, or until you get to 100 population max, or until you nearly reach the no upkeep threshold. You can see that moment happening in the future and proactively coordinate the investments in active unit production and the investments into research, since you know you are going to be making a soft stop in unit production for some period of time, so you can start getting one upgrade now at least. Upgraded units that die don't give more XP than unupgraded units, even though they are stronger. It was harder to kill them, and those units were more lethal before they died. So when it comes to value of a unit versus experience it gives, there's nothing more juicy in experience than a fully unupgraded unit. Make sense? And then fully upgraded unit is the least valuable to kill when it comes to extracting experience out of the experience of killing them. Right? Newly produced units come out with all researched upgrades already. So if there is a catastrophic meteorite event that wipes out all the dinosaurs, if they had upgraded themselves, then they would come back with bonus stat points. Right? If you lose your whole army, you start making new units again, they're all already upgraded. Nice. Upgrades globally apply to existing units. So upgrades don't have travel time. If I'm on a really big FFA map and I've got 6 Chimera and I get an attack upgrade finished, which takes 60 seconds to research, then that instantly affects my 6 Chimera next to the enemy base. If I had made a 7th Chimera instead, That also takes 60 seconds, but it now starts at home in my base and has to travel by itself over the map to rejoin my army. It could be caught, it could be killed, and it will arrive later than the attack upgrade. So, it is indeed an upgrade advantage over active unit production that they apply globally. Upgrades may also unlock abilities which alter the way units can be used. Strategies and tactics can be played and implemented. A raider without ensnare just has siege damage and is fast and is a poor fighter, but with ensnare they can start cancelling channeling ultimate abilities, they can cancel Staff of Teleportation, they can lock down units. So even if I upgrade my raiders to 3-3 attack and armor and I've got 3 raiders, they only have 3 ensnare cooldowns. Whereas if I have 6 raiders instead, which is cheaper than 3 raiders with 3-3 upgrades, they have 6 ensnares. Right? So this changes the way you can play. Oh, we found one example. Unsummoning buildings does not get taxed, which makes sense because those buildings already belong to you. One time I sent a package with the US mail to an address in the US. While I was in the US, I sent a package of things that belong to me. I was looking to sell them, a set of Pokemon cards, to a website. And they sent it back to me because they said the cards were not the ones that I said they were. They didn't want to buy them. So they sent them to my address in the Netherlands. And then the Netherlands customs charged me taxes on it because the advertised value on the Pokemon cards was $200. Even though the company that appraised them said it's not $200, it was actually less than that, but they still put $200 on the package, and now I'm being taxed $70 just to import cards that supposedly I bought from the US, which I didn't. They're mine. Yeah, that's why I thought unsummoning was also subject to tax, because of Dutch customs. I just left them there. I didn't want them back anymore. Now someone became a Pokemon card game fan at customs, no doubt. Anyway, small tangent, let's move on. There are disadvantages to upgrades as well. There is a wait time. Upgrades last anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds usually, the average being about 60 or a little over 60 seconds. The average standard unit production cycle is about 30 seconds, though Worms and Chimera are also about 60 seconds. So upgrades last on average a little longer than a unit. Upgrades have a limited effect on small scale armies, and numerical unit upgrades steeply go up in price. Usually the first upgrade costs a joint amount of about 150 to 175 resources in terms of gold and lumber, and that makes it cheaper than most units, the first upgrade. The second upgrade costs about 325, 350, 375 resources with gold and lumber added together, and that's more than most units, or about equal to most mid-game units. Whereas the final upgrade, 3 attack and 3 armor, the third one anyway, costs about 550 resources. And that is more expensive than all but the Frostworm and the Chimera, pretty much. So very expensive, they go up quite a bit in price, though not progressively so. Another disadvantage of upgrades, it creates unit switch inertia. You could have 3-3 upgraded knights, because you are feeling really good about making knights and making them valuable. But now you're up against Chimera, and the knight upgrades do not transfer over to rifleman upgrades at all. The riflemen are still 0-0. So there is an inertia in switching over to another unit if you overinvest in upgrades that you're not sure are not going to be turned obsolete at some point during the game. Upgrades also do not affect your heroes, except for those 2 exceptions, Ultravision and Force of Nature, upgrade via Nature's Blessing. So any upgrades you get, so long as heroes are also gaining in power level, and so long as heroes might even be very strong against certain units, well, you're not investing in the value of your heroes in particular with unit upgrades. Armor upgrades don't do anything if a unit that has an armor upgrade don't get attacked. You could be playing with 3 armor upgraded grunts, 3 armor upgraded wind riders, and 3 armor upgraded headhunters, but perhaps the opponent undead is only focus firing your Farseer, which ends up dying, which means your armor upgrades did nothing, right? Whereas attack upgrades maybe would have done something in that situation by providing more powerful and lethal cover fire. So an armor upgrade on a unit at least requires it to reasonably want to be attacked. by an opponent. Armor upgrades do not increase the speed of killing enemy buildings or creeps, right? Enemy buildings or neutral creeps do not die faster when you invest in armor upgrades. Armor upgrades also only provide physical protection. They cannot be doing any mitigation against spell damage like Stormbolt, Chain Lightning, Shockwave, Blizzard, Flame Strike. All of that bypasses armor upgrades. And so sometimes I look at an enemy army, I see that they have Blizzard and Thunderclap, and I have a bunch of grunts, and they have a bunch of Spellbreakers, and then I think, I could get armor upgrades here. But they're mostly going to be Blizzard and Clapped. So I'm trying to make a judgment in my head that's probably 70% hero spell damage and 30% sorceresses, priests, and Spellbreakers. I might not get an armor upgrade because while an armor upgrade gives a certain bonus effective health, it doesn't actually end up realizing its potential because most of the damage is spell. And in Warcraft 3 there are also two very niche that I can think of, purely potentially negative outcomes that relate to the Chimera and the Burrow. If you attack an Orcish base with Chimera and they have heavy armor burrows and the Chimera is unupgraded, it has a 100 damage magic damage attack that deals 200% damage against burrows. If you upgrade the Chimera to get Corrosive Breath, their attack type against buildings changes to siege damage, which is great against 95% of the buildings in the game, but not against heavy armor burrows or heavy armor walking Ancients of War. So usually you might want to upgrade Corrosive Breath as you fly your Chimera to the Orc base in secret to blow up their base. And then as you see their burrows, if they're still heavy armor, you cancel the Corrosive Breath upgrade before it finishes. But if they're fortified, then you let it finish. So you start the upgrade as an option, but you end up canceling it if you see the situation is different than what you maybe were anticipating. This, by the way, this is an option. It's just a kind of deep strategy, but there are some downsides. Okay, let's talk about the numbers, the base damage, the damage range via dice roll, adding dice per upgrade, armor, and effective physical HP. Okay, so let's go take a look at the Liquipedia attack damage page. So attack damage refers to, of course, the attack of a unit, and it's pretty interesting how Blizzard built the attack damage for units. If we take a look at the Footman, for instance, the Footman's base damage is 12 to 13. There is damage range in Warcraft 3, unlike in a game like StarCraft 1 or StarCraft 2. So how does this work, 12 to 13? Well, it's pretty simple. A Footman has a base damage of 11. And then they have a hidden base damage. Both are hidden. We only see the 12 to 13, but you can see it in the map world editor. They have a base damage of 11 damage. And then they have a die roll, I should say, of 1 to 2. And together that comprises 12 to 13. The chance that he rolls 12 damage or the chance that he rolls 13 damage is both 50% chance. And when he gets an attack upgrade, what they do simply is to add 1 die roll to his damage. So at level 1 attack upgrade, he will have 13 to 15, then 14 to 17, and finally 15 to 19. So it's 1 die roll, I really should say, per attack upgrade for the Footman. Heroes, from what I understand, use 2 die roll on top of their hidden base damage, though of course they do not benefit from blacksmith upgrades. So every Warcraft 3 unit has a hidden base damage and a hidden bonus damage via either 1 or several dice roll. The advertised unupgraded value is the result of adding those hidden values together. You can see the values in the world editor, and you can intuit it via Liquipedia's stats. Unit attack upgrades add a die roll of the predetermined amount, 1 to X, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 11 damage, to their total damage output. And we just talked about this. But let's talk about the expected outcomes of that damage range, because if you have 1 die roll in life, let's say a 1d6, the chance that you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 are all equal. There's an equal amount of chance to roll any of those. But the moment you have more than one die roll, you start having a more middling result. And while I don't have the words to describe what that means categorically, Liquipedia does. Base damage is a deterministic number, constant for units, and based on the primary attribute for heroes. On top of the base damage, a stochastic value is added. The stochastic value is the addition of random events with uniform discrete distribution in the interval 1 to M, where M and R are predefined for each unit. I just start zoning out when I read stuff like this. I think stochastic is a very cool word, but I don't know what it means. I don't know what the rest means either. Damage range of a unit is then the interval. For units using 1 dice, each damage number in this interval has the same probability of occurrence. That's what I just said in layman terms, right? Whereas for units using 2 dice, the value in the center is most likely. And it's easy to explain this in layman terms. If you roll 2d6, that is to say 2 dice with 6 sides to the die, right? You can roll 1, 1 in only one possible outcome. Both die have to roll into 1, and that is how you get the value 2. So the only way you can roll 2 is if both go to 1 and 1, and that has a single outcome possibility of happening. And the same thing for 12. You need 6, 6 to get 12. But once we start looking at something in the middle, say for instance 7, you can reach 7 by rolling 1, 6, 2, 5, 3, 4, 4, 3, 5, 2, and 6, 1. That is a lot of potential outcomes, and this is both in layman terms logical, and this is also how it actually turns out when you start testing it a lot. This is also true then for units in Warcraft 3. The more unit upgrades you get, the larger the range of the footman's potential outcome gets. He could high roll with 19 or he could low roll with 15, but he's most likely going to do 17 damage. And he's definitely going to average 17 damage. Of course, it is possible in some game that the footman will hit 19 damage 7 times in a row, but it's actually not going to happen. It is so stratospherically unlikely to happen that it's probably not going to happen. It goes to the middle, right? So that is about how attack damage works. Now let's look at how armor works. And also, we should look a little bit about the percentages of damage that you receive when you get an attack upgrade. As I mentioned, it actually adds about 12% damage when you do the calculation. So for Chimera, for instance, the damage gain per 3 upgrades is 3 to 33, as you can see here. And that means that one die roll is 1 to 11. Their base damage is 44, and they get 1 to 11 at base level, and 1 to 11 per attack upgrade. And so when you start doing the maths and you see, hey, the base damage is 45, we see that right here. And the highest range is 55 for this siege damage attack, right? So if you add the two together and then you divide it by 2, you can see that the average base damage is 50. Right? We can see that intuitively when we look at 45, 55. They have an average base damage of 50. So the amount of damage added by a single beast upgrade for Night Elf is 1 to 11. You add 1 to 11, that's 12. You divide it by 2, that's 6. So how much is 6 on top of 50 base damage? Well, that's 56 divided by 50, 1.12. So that is a 12% damage increase on the base amount of damage per upgrade. And it gets a little more interesting because we can see that one attack upgrade gives a Chimera 12% bonus damage. But my question to you is the second attack upgrade as valuable as the first? Well, the second upgrade adds the same die roll. It also adds 1 to 11 damage. So it looks like the second attack upgrade is equally valuable as the first. However, the unit already has their first attack upgrade by now. So their current attack is not 50, it's 56. But they're still getting 6 per level, 6 average damage. So now they're no longer getting 12% on their current damage. They're only getting 12% bonus damage on their erstwhile base damage. So the new attack upgrade might only be adding something like 11, 10, 9% bonus damage on their current amount. And the upgrades start getting more expensive. So it's very, very interesting. Each attack upgrade for the Footman adds an expected value of 1.5 bonus damage. This is not a 12% damage increase on the base amount per upgrade, only on the first, right? As the value added is 1.5 for every level, but the base you increase from now is larger, that means a Footman with a level 1 attack upgrade has an expected value of 14 damage, which is 12% higher than their base damage unupgraded of 12.5. However, since the level 2 upgrade increases Footman damage by that same 1.5, but the base is now 14, the relative increase is now 10.7%. And when you get to the final attack upgrade, they get only 9.7% bonus attack damage based on going from level 2 to 3. And Don Delare from the Warcraft community helped me write this paragraph as I was trying to think about this. So thanks for that. Very interesting. So now we know a little bit more about attack damage, and that while you get a linear bonus advantage because they are better than they were after the first upgrade, the actual relative increase has a drop off. Now let's take a look at armor upgrades. Each point of armor, and this, by the way, this has confused me and many people for a long time. So it's about time that there is an expose on how upgrades work in Warcraft 3. I'm sure many of you have struggled to live life normally, functioning as a human being in society, not knowing exactly whether armor upgrades have diminishing returns or not in Warcraft 3. And therefore, I am happy to open the books on that answer once and for all. Because if you go to any unit inside Warcraft 3, you can look at a unit, hover over their armor stat, and you can see the percentage of damage reduction. Ooh, okay, that's cool. So we look at a knight that has 28 armor, or we look at a hero that has 28 armor or whatever with inner fire, protection scroll, 3 armor upgrades, and we see what is the value of damage reduction. 58%. From 28 armor. But then we think, hey, I learned from that Grubby Talks video that 1 armor upgrade, which is 2 armor, gives 12% effective health. So if 2 armor is 12% effective health, how can Warcraft the game tell me that 28 armor, which would be 14 upgrades, is only 58% damage reduction? Well, it actually makes sense. Allow me to explain. All right, we had to look at all these curves for Dota 2 as well. That's right. So here's how armor works in Warcraft 3. Each point of armor increases the effective health of a unit by 6% of the unit's base hit points. And EHP, effective health, is a much used term to say, well, they don't have more hit points, but because it's harder to damage them by 12%, there's a damage reduction component, their EHP, their effective hit points, is up by that much. But I would posit we should call this physical effective hit points, or PEHP. Now, this is an important distinction because, as I mentioned, spell damage bypasses their physical protection. If you purchase something in the shop that says your EHP is going up at 12% and you get killed by a coil, you're gonna be really mad because they falsely advertised it. It's PEHP. Alright, so armor upgrades in Warcraft 3 give +2 armor. It doesn't matter whether it's to an archer, a chimera, or to a footman or a druid of the claw. It's always 12% EHP for every armor upgrade you get, and that is on the base amount of health and survivability that you have. Note, this means Blizzard created a wonderfully consistent system of 12% effectiveness per blacksmithing upgrade, whether you get attack or armor. And I like that. It's really clean. I used to think attack upgrades are roughly 10%, and I knew that armor is 12%, but it's actually both 12%, which is really cool. And this is a percentage. There is an equivalence to the percentages here, which I think is really clean. When you look at a game like StarCraft, there's an equivalence in absolute numbers. One armor is blocking 1 damage. Not a percentage, just one armor is 1 damage blocked. And one attack is 1 extra damage dealt. There are no percentages and damage range. But Warcraft 3 has more RNG, and on this stream and on this channel, we love RNG. I like games with a bit of luck, so that you can learn how to master chaos. The chaos of the universe itself, in the microcosm of a challenging game environment. I think it's fun. Bad luck, good luck, I'll take all of it. So due to the consistency of armor, the amount of effective hit points is always increased by the same absolute amount per point of armor, regardless of the current armor rating. But the relative increase in effective hit points per armor is reduced for higher armor ratings compared to lower armor ratings. Additionally, spell damage bypasses physical armor altogether, right? And that's why I talk about PEP instead of EP. The balance between armor and attack upgrades. Attack upgrades are better. This is an opinion. This is not maths. This is my opinion, and I think it's shared by many. Let's look at why attack upgrades in Warcraft 3 are better than armor upgrades in Warcraft 3. Attack upgrades help you creep faster. Creeping is the term designated to killing the, by Blizzard named, creep camps. Creep camps are neutral NPC conglomerations, gnolls, wolves, bears, etc. Neutral creeps that guard a certain area. They have gold, item, XP, and they protect valuable locations. If you want to kill them, attack upgrades helps. Armor upgrades does not help to kill them faster. In other RTS games, you scale up the value of your empire by getting upgrades, obtaining more resources, covering a larger part of the map, and getting more units. But in Warcraft 3, part of your power growth strategy is by adding more value to your heroes. And creeping is a really large part of that. So attack upgrades unlock that ability for you to do so more quickly by spending less time in a certain creep camp location and then being able to move on to the next one more quickly. As creeping in Warcraft 3 is a zero-sum game, with creeps not respawning like in a game such as Dota 2 or League of Legends, it is important that you get the biggest piece of the pie. Having more attack upgrades and more damage and more lethality, you creep faster. That might net you 1 or 2 extra bonus creep camps that an opponent now is not getting. Or in a moment of congestion where both of you are headed to the same area, it might make the difference between you not getting creep jacked by an opponent, which means being backstabbed and attacked from behind while you're doing a creep camp, and maybe you're already done with it and now you're more ready for the opponent. So attack upgrades help you creep faster. They help you kill buildings faster. Most buildings do not fight back, and even if they do, usually the goal is to kill the building fast, not to go to a building and then take less damage. That's usually not the goal, because you could just not go there, right? Attack upgrades help you kill heroes faster. Heroes have their own armor upgrades via levels, items, and HP. And if you want to kill heroes, if your strategy is focusing heroes, then attack upgrades help with that. Attack upgrades help you to kill and focus fire enemy units faster, dropping enemy damage output, which in itself serves as a kind of defensive measure. Killing an enemy unit means that it can no longer hit you, so you don't need armor as much if the enemy is dead. Just like in Starship Troopers, the enemy can't fire a nuke if you injure their hand. Killing something faster also gets you experience, which may create level ups to gain crucial new power levels. Medic! To gain crucial new power levels to heroes in an ongoing fight. Sometimes though, armor upgrades can be better. The more armor, well actually the more survivable your heroes are, right? Rings of protection, being able to save themselves with divine shield, the more likely it is that your units get focus fired instead. So armor on your units helps to prevent all of those same advantages that an opponent has with attack upgrades. Well, almost all the same. Killing buildings and creeps does not interact with your opponent's units, but killing units faster, well, armor helps to prevent that, right? If your only hero is a paladin with divine shield, then you should very likely invest in armor upgrades because the paladin ain't getting focused anyway. Some units just get hit more than they apply hits. Think for instance of spellbreakers, grunts, knights and mountain giants, right? It's especially true for melee units. These units, they run at an opponent, they'll try to get hits in, but they're taking damage from the entire enemy ranged squadron. Archers and huntresses are going to be hitting your grunts, and unless your shamans are out of position, those shamans aren't getting hit. So grunts are what is getting hit, and therefore they benefit wonderfully from armor upgrades. Sometimes armor is much better than attack because that grunt maybe is getting 1, 2 or 3 hits on an archer, but he's receiving 20, 30, 40, 50 archer shots before he even gets there. The more HP a unit has, the more an upgrade also helps. And one advantage that I didn't list here is that because armor adds EHP or PEHP, healing becomes more valuable as well. A heal on an unarmored unit for 200 gives you 200 health, but a heal on a unit that has 60 armor, it is like as if that heal gave 600 health because that health was so hard to take down, and now you give a 200 HP heal and that's going to be hard to take down as well. So the more HP a unit has, or the more HP it receives via healing, the more valuable armor upgrades are. High health totals include these above melee units. And then armor also has unique interactions in some situations, such as Batrider Unstable Concoction. After all, Concoction is either going to kill a unit or it's not. A Batrider will kill a Gargoyle, but if the Gargoyle has 3 armor upgrades, then it will not. We saw that yesterday in the Happy versus Lin match we saw, that we watched in game 2, where Gargoyles survive Batrider explosions because of the armor. And by the way, attack upgrades do not help Batrider Unstable Concoction, so it isn't even about any of the stuff we talked about before. It's just about, do you have 3 armor upgrades? If yes, your Gargoyle survives, and if no, it dies, right? So that's pretty unique. Then armor helps reduce damage taken from creeps. So it does help a bit with creeps, but I will say that the better you are as a player, the less it matters whether you have armor upgrades when it comes to meeting creeps. Many Night Elf players will get either their Ancient of War or their Demon Hunter focused, rather than their Archers, Huntresses or Dryads. And therefore, it's really about how much health, armor and saves your main hero has, or the Ancient of War, rather than your units. Now, armor upgrade level 1 can be cheaper than attack upgrade level 2. So while I said attack upgrades are better than armor, it can at least be cheaper to get your armor level 1 after getting your attack level 1. Additionally, you might still be tier 1. Maybe you never went to tier 2, and that means that you cannot get upgrade level 2. Then maybe you'll get armor upgrade level 1 after getting your attack. Additionally, after 3 attack upgrades, if you're completely full on attack upgrades, well, it's better to get an armor upgrade. It's the only way to add value to your unit, because you already fully upgraded your attack. Units that have special damage and effects may like armor upgrades in order to apply their effects more continuously. So this is very important for units that are less physical damage reliant. Take the following units. Taurens want to apply Pulverize, which does a 60 damage area of effect ability that it has a chance to proc, and when a Tauren does the Pulverize, people take 60 damage and it has nothing to do with their physical armor. So you can upgrade the Tauren in attack damage, and it's kind of meh because their main damage output is the Pulverize. It is a little bit bonus, but if you actually add the average amount of damage Pulverize adds to Tauren attacks, and I don't know the exact percentage of chance that it procs, and we definitely cannot calculate how many units he hits because that depends on the situation. But if you were to take all the Pulverize that were ever done in the world, and you would see how much of an extra damage that constitutes, then you would realize that an attack upgrade cannot possibly add 12% lethality on a Tauren because part of the damage comes from the pulverize. So maybe wouldn't it make more sense to get armor upgrade instead, so that you can be alive for longer as a Tauren, so that you can apply pulverize more often? And the same is true for Dryads. Dryad slow poison does an attack, movement slow, and it also does damage over time. So again, it is no longer a 12% damage increase for her when she gets an attack upgrade. Even though physically that's true, that's not true when you take everything into account. Same is true for Windrider and Venom Spears, Destroyer with his Orb of Annihilation. And also, sometimes it's not so much even about how much damage the unit does. Destroyer is Undead's only dispel. Mountain Giant is probably more of a tank than a damage dealer for the most part. So then you want to get like Taunt with the Mountain Giant and everything. It's true for Spellbreakers. Spellbreakers burn enemy mana, and that is going to be more useful to make sure that the breaker survives. You get armor upgrades so the breaker survives, so he can apply his feedback anti-magic auto attack modifier more often. And it's not so much about getting attack upgrades on them. Armor can also apply to multiple units from different trees. So if you get plating, for instance, from the blacksmith for human, that gives armor to tanks, flying machines, knights, and spellbreakers, which is a really wide variety of units that can produce from 3 different buildings, right? But if you get gunpowder, that affects flying machines, tanks, riflemen, right? But it doesn't affect something like Griffin Riders or Footmen and so on. So armor can be the one to get if you are producing both knights and flyings, even if individually flyings might benefit more from attack upgrades. If these are the 2 units you make, you cover a larger swathe of your units by doing armor. Based on all of the above, we can create some fun examples that highlight when to get upgrades, right? If you have 8 units and you go from 8 to 9 units, what is the bonus percentage of damage you get when you get an upgrade, and what is the bonus percentage of damage you get when you get a 9th unit? Well, it's actually kind of the same, right? Because in situation A, you add 1 unit, go from 8 to 9 units. The 9th unit increases your army's damage by 12.5%. If you're only looking at those 8 units, not heroes, not other units. Whereas in situation B, that's a 12% damage increase. So it's about the same. So next time you're in Warcraft 3 game and you have 8 units, could be 8 grunts, 8 archers, 8 griffin riders, and you're thinking, shall I add another unit or shall I get an attack upgrade? Know that the DPS of your army roughly goes up by the same amount. Not counting the special situation where you've got attack modifiers like Pulverize, Dryad Slow Poison, or Spellbreaker feedback. So there are some considerations that go beyond the DPS output. For example, in this situation A, where you add a unit, you also have a unit that requires supply. It adds another body on the field that has their own way of moving, right? They can body block, they can surround, they can leave by their own volition when you control them to do so. They can go to a new location by themselves. You cannot send a unit upgrade to go to a new location by themselves. They have their own health totals. They give experience when they die. That 9th unit needs to be reinforced from the base to wherever you are. That 9th unit may have their own mana pool and ability cooldowns. For example, a 9th Destroyer can do another Dispel magic. A 9th Raider has an Ensnare. A 9th Druid brings his own Rejuvenation and Roar mana pool. So sometimes you do want that 9th unit. It has some pros and cons, but there are a lot of specificities that may help you make the choice to add a 9th unit instead of an attack upgrade or an armor upgrade. The same thing is true for adding a 9th unit. The total amount of effective physical health an opponent needs to chew through goes up by 12.5% when you add a 9th grunt. And if you add an armor upgrade, it's the same amount of damage an opponent needs to do to kill those 8 grunts. In situation B, you may be adding an attack upgrade instead of a unit. You go from 8 units and you add an attack upgrade. So this increases your damage output by 12%. You do not yield experience to opponents when you die, when that 9th unit dies, because it doesn't exist, right? You can only give XP 8 times. It does not clutter up the battlefield, it doesn't need to be reinforced in the walking path, doesn't require supply, will apply to all future units as well, and the first upgrade is usually cheaper than the 9th unit you may be thinking of making. So when it comes to specific units like Dryads, I would probably sooner add a 9th Dryad, as I can get more control via their slow poison, I can do more dispel, I can try to overwhelm someone fast with lots of units, and their damage is more agnostic when it comes to attack upgrades because slow poison is a component. So if I'm rushing someone, I'm probably getting a 9th Dryad rather than one attack upgrade for them. But if I am building grunts, I might sooner add a unit armor upgrade rather than a 9th grunt. Grunts are built to die slowly, they're tanky, and I'm often going to be losing quite a bit of them and then replacing them. In a different situation, you might have a unit that may become fodder because they're getting countered, and then no amount of upgrades or unit additions should be chosen to do because they're becoming obsolete, right? If I have 8 grunts and I'm thinking of a 9th grunt or an armor upgrade, I might actually be needing to think about not doing any of that because my opponent has 6 frost worms, right? Doesn't matter if I have 1 armor upgrade or 9th grunt because 6 frost worms will annihilate those grunts, and I need to start thinking of not going grunts anymore and starting to get some bat riders, raiders, or headhunters or wind riders. So we should rather focus on replacing our army composition to increase its quality rather than dumping any more resources into obsolescent units. There's one more caveat. Most RTS games that don't have heroes have an upgrade system for units which comprises the totality of value add to your armies. And that kind of comes back to this Reddit post that we looked at in the start. This guy likes to upgrade his units fully, but why do some players not do this? And it's because of heroes. Heroes are part of the power build, the power growth strategy of Warcraft 3 strategies, of Warcraft 3 power growth, right? Because there are heroes, getting upgrades only affects some of your power, not your heroes. The total value of your total army power that you get from upgrades is reduced. Heroes generally don't enjoy any upgrades made from buildings, yet comprise a large part of the total power level of your forces. Think therefore of upgrades that are not called upgrades as also being upgrades. So we've got all the upgrades that we mentioned at the start, qualitative, numerical upgrades, transformational upgrades, etc. But there are other upgrades that aren't called upgrades, such as, what do you think of a potion of invulnerability for a hero? It is an upgrade because it can temporarily turn your hero invincible, and it makes you have a higher power level when you have it, but it is not a blacksmith upgrade. So whereas in StarCraft someone might be making a zealot attack upgrade, and then they say, okay, cool, I can now 2-shot a Zergling instead of 3-shot a Zergling. An invulnerability potion is also an upgrade that costs 150 resources, which is the same amount of resources Ironforged swords for human costs. We go to the Ironforged swords. How much does this cost? 100 gold and 50. That's 150 together. So you can either get Ironforged swords or Potion of Lesser Invulnerability from the Goblin shop. It's an interesting way in that you have to make, an interesting decision. So as a Warcraft player, you balance out your investments into upgrades across both your units and your heroes. Examples of hero or even unit upgrades that aren't actually called upgrades, but I see them as upgrades, are as follows. Hero experience. Every time your heroes kill units, either creeps or enemy units, you get experience that gets you level ups and that gets you hero abilities. A level 3 Stormbolt compared to a level 2 Stormbolt is also an upgrade in power level. And StarCraft has no analogy for that because StarCraft doesn't have heroes. And this should be weighed in as well. Number 5, hero self-buffing permanent items, such as Ring of Protection, Periapto Fatality, Lightning Shield, Staff of Mastery, Mask of Death, Orb of Darkness. There are so many hero self-buffing permanent items, and there are also upgrades. Number 6, hero army buffing permanent items, auras, Scourge Bone Chimes, right? Lion Horn of Stormwind, you've got Ancient Django of Endurance, Khadgar's Bong of Brilliance. A lot of different aura items that buff your units via your heroes. Number 7, hero self-consumable items. Tomes, Tome of Agility, Potion of Lesser Invulnerability, Healing Scroll, Heal Potion, Mana Potion, Mana Stone, all kinds of consumables, Scroll of the Beast, right? And then number 8, hero unit buffing consumable items. Heal Salve buffs the non-combat regeneration of units. Protection Scroll buffs heroes and units in their armor stat, 12% effective health. Staff of Preservation is buffing your unit's mobility. They can teleport to your main base. And Healing Scroll gives an instant heal to units all around you. 3 of these affect units permanently via direct unit upgrades. The top 3. The other 5 are all untraditional upgrades that do not carry the name upgrades. Therefore, think of Warcraft 3 upgrades and realize only 3 out of 8 are called upgrades, and all of them increase your power level. Let's get to the conclusion and my recommendation on upgrades. So when you're deciding when to get upgrades, which ones to get, and how to go about your general upgrade strategy, you're engaging with a part of the game that is a large and very enjoyable part of figuring out your game plan in any RTS, and Warcraft 3 is no different. The first numerical upgrade is by far the most worth it, as it is the cheapest, represents the largest relative power increase, and also researches the quickest. For special transformational upgrades, try to get upgrades early. Usually this is before your first unit or after your first unit. So I will get 1 Shaman and then Adept Training so that I have Lightning Shield and I get more mana pool and more mana regen. Or maybe I get 2 Shamans and then I get Adept Training. Or maybe 3 Shamans and then Adept Training. And I may eventually get Master Training. And I would even go Master Training Witch Doctor off the back of 0 Witch Doctors, 1 Witch Doctor, or 2 Witch Doctor. These are special transformational upgrades. They change how the unit can be used. Outside of just using Sentry Ward on Witch Doctor, I can now use Healing Ward, which is a massive upgrade. I'd rather have 1 Witch Doctor with Healing Ward than 5 Witch Doctors with only Sentry Wards. And so it is very different than the numerical upgrade plan of a blacksmith. For numerical value upgrades, consider getting 1 upgrade early, as it is fast, cheap, and the largest relative power increase. And it could be as early as when you have about 4 to 6 of that unit. 6 Huntresses, 1 attack upgrade. 7 Huntresses, 1 armor upgrade. Yeah, something like that. There is a large strategical consideration for when to get upgrades and whether you should get them and whether you shouldn't get them. Maybe you're looking to switch unit type and it's no longer worth investing in Huntress because now you need Archers, which actually have the same unit upgrade. Maybe you need Chimera instead, which have a different upgrade, right? So there are strategical and tactical considerations, but purely numerically, the first attack upgrade, you could get it at 4, 5, or 6 units, and it might make a lot of sense based on many of the reasons we discussed. If you enjoyed this video, please consider upgrading this vid in the YouTube algorithm's eyes so more people can upgrade their Warcraft 3 knowledge and their love for games. See ya next time. Thanks for watching.